Alright, hello everybody. My name is Chris Marks. I am the coach of the Toronto Trick Roomers in the W&W Pokemon Draft League. And today I'm going to be going through my Season 7 draft prep. I've already done a fair bit of work just trying to tidy this up, get some of the really tedious stuff done so that we don't have to suffer through that in the video, but why don't we just get into it? So what you're looking at here is my whittled down tier list. If I come over here to the actual master sheet, you can see that the full tier list is much longer, and it also has the franchised Pokemon listed. So over here on the prep document, we've gotten rid of those. We've gotten rid of all the Pokemon that I don't think are any good, or that I don't want to play, or that I just have no idea how to use personally. And we've narrowed it down to 341, which is still a lot of Pokemon. But now what we're going to do is we're going to work on taking this narrowed down list that we've got here and turning it into our short list here. But before we do any of that, I want to talk about kind of how I'm going about building the team. And so what I'm really trying to do as I put this together is make sure that I hit on these core composition requirements. One of the things that I'm looking for this season is to make sure that I grab a decent or good support from every tier. Obviously I want to use my second tier 1 slot to pick up something that can do a lot of damage and hopefully carry, just because tier 1's the best place to do that outside of Gmax and Legend. But also a few supportive type things that I want to make sure I hit on is not just grabbing supports, but I want to make sure that I've got speed control. I want to make sure that I've got some kind of weather and terrain. I want to make sure that I get at least one fake out user, just because that's very important in some matchups. And I want some kind of redirection or slot protection, so follow me or ally switch. Intimidate is honestly a bit of a soft requirement. That's not a big deal, but it is something I'm going to try and fit in. Just because Intimidate cycling usually does pretty well in the league. In the past, it's been pretty physical heavy. We've moved more towards the special side of things over the seasons, but Intimidate's always just good to have, especially when teams like Nashville love to pick up Pokemon like the Excadrill and go for early Dynamaxes. You can use Intimidate to really punish those. But if I actually go in here, I've already put in some Pokemon, so we can take a look at this. Is sort of like an optimal draft that I've already theorized. And if I just go ahead, I think you can just get all of this at once. Yeah. Darkens out. We can take a look. So in this optimal draft, the legend tier, we've got Moltres, Galar, an important distinction. But we pick up the Moltres, we get Venusaur, which is something a lot of people have shied away from in the league in previous seasons. Trying to play weather teams is always a bit strenuous because it takes up 2 draft slots to make it work. But we've got some cheeky plans for this season to make it good. Dragapult, this one's going to be tricky. If I come over here, we actually selected the draft order today, so we know when we will be picking. And we are actually the 5th overall pick in the draft, which means since we have a franchise Pokemon taking up our first pick, there are a total of 8 picks happening before us. And while everybody needs to pick up their Legend and everybody needs to pick up their Gmax tiers, tier 1's something people are probably going to be willing to dip down and get early. So this Dragapult might be heavily contested. In particular, the West Texas Wingles, I know, are big fans of it. They had it last season for season 6. And it's a Pokemon that they're super comfortable with. They love using, so might not be able to get our hands on this. Comfey is just a good tier 1 support. Pairs really well with the Moltres as well as the Dragapult. And can do a lot of surprisingly good stuff on its own in a draft league scenario. Sableye is a good support that kind of does a lot of everything. It's speed control, honestly, in its own weird way. It's got good support moves like Will-O-Wisp. It's got the Fake Out, so it gives us another Fake Out user. And it gets the 2 weather moves that really matter in Rain and Sun. So it can set those with Prankster, which means it pairs well with the Venusaur, and it might catch a few people off guard early in the season that don't know that it does that. We get Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz is a Tailwind setter. It's bulky, and if I'm already going to be playing around one dark flying type, it seems okay to play around another, especially when they do pretty different things. This should be Tangrowth. Tangrowth gives us redirection with the Rage Powder, which, you know, is the slightly worse version of Follow Me because of the grass Pokemon getting immunity and Goggles giving immunity, but it's still good. But then we've also got the Ally Switch on Comfey, which is useful. Salazzle, very fast, Fake Out, gives us a fire type that we're kind of significantly lacking here. I know this says Vulpix, but Vulpix doesn't do a whole lot. But the Manectric giving Lightning Rod to the team to help protect Moltres in games where that might matter. Jersey City has now played Xurkitree 2 seasons in a row. And knowing them, they have no problem redrafting a Pokemon. So, excuse me. They're vaguely likely to go for that again. Dugtrio, Alolan, is a kind of new tech piece that I like. It gives the steel typing. It's got interesting abilities. It's surprisingly fast, and more importantly, it kind of has a pretty decent matchup into a lot of stuff people like to pick in this league, like the Arcanine and things like that. If you can get it out in front of that, it can actually deal with it pretty well, especially if you pair it with the right Pokemon. So there's that. Tier 4s, I'm going to skip over the Vulpix for a second. We're going to go down. I'm going to try to get the Beheeyem and the Wailord again. These are Pokemon that I've used out of Tier 4 very successfully in the past, and we're kind of just going for comfort, you know. Salazzle as well is a Pokemon that I've used repeatedly in the league and had pretty good success with. And the main thing is, if I'm building a Sun team, Salazzle deals with Metagross so well. And with the Sun, it just makes it that much easier, and I fully anticipate somebody picking up the Metagross. But as you can see with this, we miss on the Intimidate, which isn't huge, but we've got our Fire, Water, Grass core over here. Venusaur, Wailord, Salazzle cover that pretty well. And the Fairy Steel Dragon core, super covered. So I think the next thing I want to do is just, I already put these in as the top row, because this really does flesh out the sort of team comp I want to build. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the contingency plan for each of these Pokemon down here, and then I'm kind of going to discuss the priority for each slot. So maybe I'll give that its own little box down here. Nice pretty white box. We'll kind of discuss the priority, and obviously this doesn't have one because we already picked it. But yeah, so coming out of the G-Max tier, if we go look at this, part of what the Venusaur is there to do is just put on high pressure with both poison and grass. Fairy typing is, I mean, as you can tell by the core list that we were using over here, Fairy is something that a lot of people strive to have in their draft league team for doubles. A lot of the best supports are Fairy typing, and while steel types are very good, they usually come at a pretty high cost coming out of the higher tiers, and they're usually slightly less flexible unless you go for something like the Metagross, I guess the Duraludon is pretty flexible, but giving up a G-Max tier slot for that, given the current meta and the way that the game is, it just doesn't feel great, especially for Pokemon that you don't really want to use the G-Max form of. And so I think I like the direction of going for the Venusaur. It helps into Tapu Fini, which is something I expect to be drafted. It helps this. A lot of times in this league, people have played around water types pretty heavily. We know for a fact that Jersey City is going to have the Vaporeon that we've got to get through. So Venusaur is a tool that will really help us accomplish those things. And so in looking for a replacement for that, the options are pretty limited. Realistically, we're kind of banking on the fact that people don't want the Venusaur. They don't want a hard commit to a Sun team, especially when you can only have one of Venusaur or the Charizard. You can't have both. It's kind of disincentivized, but in the instance that we don't get it, one of the better options to go for is going to be this Rillaboom, which I'm going to go ahead and write in as the second option. It helps us maintain that grass core aspect that we need, because we don't really have offensive grass anywhere else in the team. We have Tangrowth if we absolutely need it to do offense, but realistically that's a defensive tool and would really rather pick up a grass core as an offensive threat. And so another thing that's just kind of good to have is a lot of the things that threaten this draft, in particular the Comfy Moltres Dragapult. It is weak to fighting, and that's something we currently don't have on the team. So another thing that I think is useful in this slot is Urshifu, and I'm going to go ahead and put both, but I think Surging Strikes is better just because it actually wins the 1v1 between the Urshifus. And I think it's just regular Urshifu. I forget how we denote them in this league, but it's Rapid Strike, Single Strike. That's what it is. So I would rather this be Rapid Strike is the higher, and then Single Strike Urshifu. Both valuable. I feel like this is kind of just a hunch. I don't want to put Lapras on my draft board because I feel like it's going to be heavily contested. But just going down the list, Alchemy is a little too defensive for what I'm looking for out of the G-Max tier. Blastoise, I could use if I had to, but I don't really like it. It doesn't have as much offensive power as I would like. Butterfree's, again, too supportive. Centiskorch, you kind of have to babysit, and I'm not looking to do that. Charizard kind of lets me play around the Sun team. Can add that to the short list, but I think I'm going to give it a gap. Charizard just gets outsped by a lot of the other really good Pokemon in this league. And that's a bit worrisome, but it does still give me the chip damage per turn aspect, just like G-Max Vine Lash. That's what Wildfire does. And so it's valuable in that. It gets good coverage. It gets the grass coverage in particular. Just very scared of somebody picking up Lycanroc or any other good. Like if somebody goes Regirock and builds Trick Room, we're kind of in massive trouble because both of our tier 1s are scared to be in that, or both of our S tiers, which is Legend and G-Max, are scared to be in that scenario. Cinderace is a good option. It does a lot of what I need out of that slot, if I'm being honest. It might be higher up this waterfall list than this indication, but I think that's something I'm just going to have to call day of draft. It feels okay to put here, though. So coming back to the list, Colossal is just a little too hard to use for Draft League, and Colossal shines in competitive play when your opponent has to be ready for a lot of other stuff. But in Draft League, your opponent knows Colossal is an option for you, and they can build around that specifically. They can calc specifically for the Colossal, which makes it much harder to execute on. And while I feel capable of doing so, I think that's a level of effort per game that I don't think I have to do, so I want to avoid it. So I'll pass on that. Corviknight is... It's okay. But I don't think it fits what we're going for here. Dreadnought is oddly usable. It's just highly regrettable that its Dynamax move is so kind of it using the water move instead of the rock move to set everything up kind of feels bad. If it was the other way around, it could actually set its own rain, get advantage of Swift Swim, but I think it's doable, but it doesn't fit what we're building, and therefore I'm going to hard pass on it. Duraludon's like an if I have to. If I feel like I have to. Like if I lose out on Venusaur and Dragapult, I might go for the Duraludon. Being able to avoid redirection is nice in Draft League, but probably not worth it. Flapple, I'll be honest, this shouldn't be here. I don't know how to use Flapple. I wouldn't know where to begin with that. And with how popular or how contested of a pick I think Mamoswine might be, I'm not tempted to try my hand with Flapple. Gengar is interesting, but I don't think it's worth the Gmax slot in the draft here. Grimmsnarl can go down here. It's kind of in a similar situation with... That is not how you spell Grimmsnarl. I don't even know if that's spelled right, I'm going to be honest with you. But it's like the better version of pulling the supports out of here. It would open me up to grabbing something more offensive instead of Sableye out of tier 2. If we're just like forced off of this whole weather idea, then that's kind of a valuable direction to be able to go in. So there's that. Hatterene, we're not looking to play Trick Room very heavily this season. Inteleon just kind of doesn't do it for me. Kingler, too awkward. Lapras, I said I wasn't going to put it on the list, but I'm going to. It just pairs really well with the Comfey that we're already planning to pick up. So it could be good. I just don't think I'll be able to get it is really the big issue there. Orbeetle, I just don't want to. Rillaboom we've already talked about. Sandaconda's okay. It doesn't really fit the draft we're building, but Sandaconda could be okay here. If the draft gets like super physical, I might come back and look at this, but reality, no. Snorlax, we're not really playing a comp that Snorlax fits in, I don't think. Toxtricity, there's so much ground coverage that flies around every season. It's just way too scary. And then these other three are already on our list. So this is kind of what we're looking at out of the Gmax tier. And by kind of, this is what we're looking at out of the Gmax tier. The reality is we're vaguely flexible, but I really don't think anybody's going to take this Venusaur. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. And to force us down to here, like just inherently force us down to here, we would have to get all of our Gmax picks taken away. And that's just not going to happen. Statistically, that's not going to happen. But I think Venusaur is going to go uncontested. It's completely underexplored in the league for reasons that make a lot of sense. People don't really want to dedicate their tier 1 slot to picking up the Torkoal or the Ninetales, so I feel like we can get away with this. So I'm actually going to put this as like a pretty low priority when it comes to that. But I'm not going to mark it now. I'm going to come back to that. Looking back here at the tier list, Comfey is kind of a must grab. Realistically, the only good replacement we have for it is like a Clefairy. That's not great. Trying to think what else we could do. Yeah. I realistically, I think this slot is just comfy Clefairy or Flounder for a non-support. Just pick up some huge damage here. If people are willing to focus that hard on supports, then something like that Metagross I was talking about should be up. And while we're not super worried about somebody else getting that, because we have the Moltres, if we get this Venusaur, if we have this Salazzle, we have a lot of ways to deal with it. But, if people are just going to leave it there, it's a really good pick, and we might as well just pick it up. Or something like the Celesteela, maybe. The Kartana, but that'll kind of just be me reading what's left open and going for a power pick there. So I don't think I want to spend any time denoting that. Is there any other good support that I'm missing here that could fill that slot? Maybe Togekiss is worth listing in that, just because it's the good redirection. And it can actually be an offensive threat if I need it to be, if I need offensive fairy. Which Clefairy can't do for me. But realistically, I think that's it for that slot. So, with that, we need to discuss this contentious, I don't know if I used that word right, but this highly contested Dragapult pick. I think it's going to be contested. Everybody in the league knows how good it is, and more importantly, people know how much I like it. And if we look at this draft order, the people that know that I like it are Charlotte, who has the first pick, the Wingles, who have the third pick, and the pick right after me, the Ninetales, in sixth. So, gonna have to kind of be really high priority on this. Honestly, this is probably going to have to be our first pick if it's still there, but it might not even be there for that. So I really want this slot to cover Dragon is the big thing. So the things we're looking at are like Garchomp, Goodra. Goodra Comfy is really popular in ranked, or at least it was for a while there. We took Salamence off of this, which I kind of agree with, but maybe we need to bring it back. And Kingdra, which, if we're going to go towards this whole like Sableye weather support, either the Klefki or the Leopard can do the same job. We'll get to that, but I think we'd be okay to say something like Garchomp, Goodra, Kingdra all work out of this slot. They all pair with the Comfy really well. They're all dragons, and if we do get the ability to set/change weather effectively, then these can all thrive. Which is kind of the contingency for the Kingdra being good, is getting our hands on this tier 2 slot. So I've already indicated the things that go here. It's Sableye. Realistically, the Leopard's better. And then the Klefki. If I want this to be an actual waterfall list, I think that slot really comes down to needing one of those. So realistically, I think the highest priority in the draft is going to be these 3 slots. For the Mandibuzz, I mean, the key thing that Mandibuzz does here is the Tailwind. It's bulky, which I like, but if we really want to talk about tier 2 Tailwind setters, Noivern's the fastest. Very good. It can do a lot of offensive stuff as well, so I like it for that. I'm not in love with the idea of Pelipper, although we certainly could do the Pelipper if we end up going for the Kingdra, and maybe it's better for that to just have the inherent weather setter instead of always needing to bring the weather setting support. So I'll write Pelipper here, which I always spell wrong. I'm pretty sure this is incorrect. I think it's 2 L's. Nope. Hey, look at that. Good job, me. That, or it's spelled wrong on the tier list, which would also be my fault. But, and then tier 2 redirection. Realistically, there's a whole bunch of stuff I can do with this slot. One thing that I like doing here is picking up the Sarita, shut down my opponent's priority moves, get access to Grassy Glide if there's grassy terrain, which, we can't set if we do the Venusaur, but, there are other ways. And I think it could be okay. A few of the other Pokemon that I like here, getting Kangaskhan could be good. Kangaskhan, if that's wrong, sue me. But getting the ability to fake out the ghost types, the stuff like the Dragapult if we lose it, is pretty good. I like picking up the Hitmontop in this slot as well. That's pretty usable. It gives us that Intimidate we were looking for. We've used Hitmontop in the past, and it's gone pretty well. If we want another Redirector, Volcarona can do it. It's not my favorite option, but it does give more offense than Tangrowth. So that's good. And Driftblim could set Tailwind. I don't really have a good way to set up the Unburden with this team. But yeah. Just kind of glossing. I guess I can move my cursor a little bit so y'all can see where I'm looking. Crobat. I don't like the idea of Crobat. It's slower than I want it to be. I know it's fast, but it's slower than I want it to be to do a lot of its stuff, and it feels like it needs Choice Scarf a lot of the times, and that just feels awkward on it. Durant. I like Durant. There are people that hate Hustle, and that's very fair, but I like the Durant. I think it does a lot of stuff well. It's got a decent speed tier, and only being weak to fire is something I think we can cover pretty capably with the team that we're building. So looking. Alolan Persian could be okay. Poliwrath could be okay. Zoroark is just a goofy pick. It's only good if your opponents are not ready for it. That's more of a knowledge-based check than a good Pokemon. I like the idea of Scizor, but the reality is much different. I think that wraps up this slot pretty well. I think that's enough options as well. There's enough going on in here in tier 2 that I can really slot a lot of different stuff in, and I feel pretty comfortable using past experience to flounder around in tier 2 if I get stuck. This is a pretty long list right here of stuff that there's no way that fits into everybody's drafts. If this whole thing gets drafted, I will do something that doesn't sound fun. I will lick a sock. I don't know. But I really don't expect all these picks to go. Coming out of tier 3, this is where drafting starts to get hard, because the tier 3 is you kind of got to figure out what you want to do with them in advance. You need to have a game plan or a play. So looking at it, Salazzle, one of the good things about it for my team is that it's a fire type, and there is a classic fire type in the league that I've gone to a great number of times, that the league has gone to a great number of times, in Turtonator. Bulky, excellent with a weakness policy. It can just wall stuff out and do enough damage to get you across the finish line. There's not any fake out users left here that I'm super in love with, and I like. There's the more Pico that I guess I do really like here that we could go for. It's not really over covering anything on the team. It's fast. Aura Wheel's a really good move. You can choice band it if you need to, or you can just sash it, do whatever. Decent support, high enough damage, fast enough that it kind of works a lot like the Salazzle. Just missing that good fire type. But maybe like if we end up picking up the Charizard instead of the Venusaur, this could be good because we no longer really need the Salazzle in this slot. So picking up more Pico might be a fundamentally correct play in that instance. So I think I like having it here on the list. Oh, I goofed. Silly me. More Pico. Looking strictly to fill that slot. The Torracat is, in a lot of ways, Baby Incineroar. You don't get Darkest Lariat, but you get a lot of the egg moves. You are a fire type. It's not going to do great damage, but it's going to do some damage. And that Intimidate is big. Pretty sure I get Fake Out. Yeah, you'd have to get it because it's an egg move, right? Let's pull up Showdown and see if Torracat gets Fake Out. This is not the fastest way to look this up, but I don't know why I'm doing that. Yeah, Fake Out. Just come over here, validate. As long as you don't tell me that Fake Out's an illegal move, we're cool, and it doesn't. So, we can have Fake Out that way. And it's a fire type. That makes it a decent cover, if it has to be one. Looking. I don't really see any other super good replacements for this. And again, this is one of these slots where in Tier 3, you might end up being forced into floundering anyway, no matter what you go for, just because Tier 3 is such a playground for everybody. But I think I like that short list right there. I think that's valid enough. Manectric, the big thing with Manectric here is getting that Lightning Rod, like I talked about, but it's also fast. It gets some supportive moves. It can do enough damage. So again, the more Pico kind of vaguely covers the slot. Not really, but kind of. But it's going to be hard to replace. So we're kind of relying on the fact that this Pokemon is flying under the radar. Boltund and Luxray kind of accomplish being an electric type the same. I like Luxray because it's still got some good supportive stuff it can do, as well as being offensive. Oh, we missed a big one under Salazzle. Magmortar is actually a pretty good play if we need something out of that slot. Good catch me. So I guess how do we cover this slot if the Manectric gets taken away from us? There's not really a good answer to that, is there? We could do something like the Hitmonlee might be okay. Pick up the fighting type, get the Unburden. It's significantly easier to get the Unburden off on these fighting types that can just close combat to activate a White Herb that are already pretty quick. Hitmonlee. Sigilyph gets kind of a weird supportive moveset that makes it okay. We could look for this Mantine. Actually, a pretty awkward but decent support coming out of here. And maybe the Musharna. So I think, like Sigilyph, Mantine, Musharna, Slurpuff. How would I rank those? Probably Mantine, Sigilyph. No. Musharna, Mantine, Sigilyph. Yeah, let's just do those three. that's enough to cover that slot. And realistically, if it goes past Musharna, we're in floundering territory. Dugtrio is covering my steel type. As much as I don't want to play Ludicolo, it's usable. I don't like it, but it realistically is the next best thing here. Double checking that. Yeah, it's kind of just the Ludicolo, right? If I wanted a better one, I would need to move up a tier to grab it. Skarmory, I'm not a big fan of it. It doesn't do very much offensively. So this one's kind of thin. It's just Dugtrio, Lucario. I think having this slot thin and just moving over here to pick up something, kind of okay. But realistically, that's that. Something we can do if we lose the Manectric is coming over here and doing Seeking to get our Lightning Rod. I know people would love to see that. So the idea with the Vulpix is that obviously it gets the Drought, it can set the Sun for the Venusaur, but it gets a very odd supportive set of moves that make it kind of usable under the assumption that it's just going to get ignored, right? So you go Drought, you get Baby Doll Eyes, which is good. You get Burning Jealousy, which is a good move against physical teams. If they're going to Dynamax, you get Hypnosis. If you're feeling brave, you can Power Swap. Sunny Day's not good. What was it? You get the Will-O-Wisp. That's cool. You get Foul Play, which is kind of the big one. Is just be able to whack something that gets like a weakness policy procced, or something that's just already high attack and weak to dark type moves. It's good for bonking those. Encore and Disable are kind of niche, but have proven to be useful in the past for me. So just being able to sneak those in and catch somebody in transition and just lock them in, or catch somebody while I'm in transition into a not effective move, or to lock somebody into Fake Out or something like that, can be valuable, or to just get rid of a problematic move while a different Pokemon protects using the Disable. Kind of nice. You know, the tier 4 is honestly, I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to stare at this every time I'm picking a tier 4 slot. To try and figure out what I really want to do there. But those are like the big ones. There's a lot of decent options here. Like if the Seeking is also taken away, Rhydon has Lightning Rod down here. Cottony has a fantastic Prankster supportive set. Comes from these lower tiers. Emolga's annoying. Lantern can be good offensively. Can do some supportive stuff. Wishcash gets Dragon Dance. I don't know how many people in the league know that. We could look to do something with that. But yeah, I think tier 4 is kind of just a little open. So as we were discussing before, I kind of want to just touch on this priority stuff and then be done. But I think this slot, super important. This one immediately has to follow. Then it's this one. Then I think going ahead and going here, as much as this just looks like I'm going down the list, I honestly think that's kind of the priorities here. This is probably more important than this. And then 8. Probably come up here and do 9, 10 just to lock this in. And then 11 and 12. Obviously increment these by 1 because Moltres is the first pick, but I think this is what we're looking at drafting this season for season 7. Should be a strong team, should be a fun team. I'm looking forward to drafting. Of course, we're going to post the draft review, so you'll be able to see what I actually end up with. But with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.